Okay, I think this is the last video. If you've indulged me so far, thank you. Okay, so let's see, I'm reading your text here on my computer. It says, I still feel my risk of unknown side effects down the road from a vaccine is likely the same or worse as the risk of having or contracting a bad reaction to COVID. I think that if you look purely at data, right, which is how we should examine risk, and we say scientists examine the risk of long-term side effects as well, and they look at possible side effects. So for example, when the FDA gave out its emergency use authorization, it wasn't because like, oh, we don't have enough data, but like, we're scrambling, here you go. It was because they said, actually, we have quite a lot of data to suggest that this is safe and effective, and that this is such a serious public health crisis and so many people are dying, that the benefits of getting that out there and reducing COVID exposure and death and the unnecessary death involved with overcrowding hospitals, for example, definitely makes a case for moving forward. In fact, the FDA's words specifically are, in order to give an emergency use authorization, the FDA must determine that the known benefits of the vaccine, and I'm reading here that wrote down from their website, outweigh the known and potential risks of the vaccine, right? And that includes from all the safety and efficacy data. And so when we talk about potential risks, we are thinking about what side effects, short-term or long-term, are they? And they've evaluated those. And based on that data, they don't feel like there is a likelihood of any, let alone severe, side effects down the road. Doesn't mean there's zero, and there may be something we discover in the future, but we are always having to make decisions based on what we know today. Otherwise, we'd never leave our homes, right? Because obviously, like, there's an unknown risk of me dropping my kids off at camp or, taking a walk. But there are also known risks, and I evaluate my decisions based on the known risks, right? I understand the risks of getting in a car, and therefore I educate myself on how to drive, etc. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent. But the point is, I think the risks of coronavirus are understood and are known. And I think, yes, they are more serious among adults. They are more serious among people with pre-existing conditions. And there's sort of 2 points then to be made about that. One is that even people who, so yes, the serious COVID, right, is more likely in older people, or at least was in the past when older people were also not vaccinated. It is worse in older people or people who are more at risk, is true, but it doesn't mean that younger people are like off the hook, right? There are plenty of 30-year-olds who have had to be on ventilators, sadly. There are people who are in their 30s, 40s who've died, right? It's not to say it's likely, but is it likely that you're going to die from the vaccine? No. So that's the risk that you're evaluating. In addition, this whole idea of long COVID in terms of long side effects, like one thing that scientists are trying to study is why are some people, for no seemingly like rational correlative reason, affected by COVID for a long period of time, like the long haulers. That doesn't seem to matter whether you're young or old. That's what we don't know. And that to me would be a serious long-term side effect that I'd be super concerned about. And that's of getting COVID. And the way that I prevent that side effect from happening is from getting the vaccine, right? Because you don't get COVID with the vaccine, remember. And then the second thing I guess I would mention is because the more vulnerable people are more likely to die, that to me is even more reason for us younger, healthier people to assume whatever risk there is in getting the vaccine, so we help the rest of the world, really. Because the more people who are vaccinated, the less likely the disease is to grow and spread, right? And even if it turns out that with these new variants, and there's a reason for that, if you can get COVID and you can still spread it, we're still going to be spreading it less, right? Because what the vaccine does is it reduces the severity of your COVID. And specifically how viruses spread is through symptomatic exposure. It's through sneezing, it's through coughing. It's the worse you feel, the more likely you are to, be coughing and sneezing and spreading those germs. That's why if you get COVID and you're asymptomatic, not pre-symptomatic, but asymptomatic, you're very unlikely to spread it because your bodily fluids aren't all out and about. And so the more people that have it, the less likely to spread it, particularly those people who can't otherwise get it, children or people who are contraindicated for some reason. And even people who are immunosuppressed in some cases can get the vaccine. So that's not to say that that's impossible either. And so, yeah, that brings me to the last point, which is this doesn't end, like this global crisis does not end unless COVID, unless the coronavirus dies out. And the only way it can do that is if it reaches enough dead-end hosts. And dead-end hosts meaning like it can't be spread from them to somebody else. If it can do that by like infecting enough people and killing enough people. And if enough people die, right, eventually the virus has nowhere to go, it has nowhere to grow, it can't mutate anymore and change. And so it dies off. I don't think we want that to happen, right? The only other way is if it's a dead end host because you've been vaccinated. So if enough people have been vaccinated and it can't continue to spread, then it can't continue to mutate because mutations happen through spreading. So in India, where unfortunately huge population didn't have access to the vaccine, it spread like crazy, it mutated a ton, and that's how we ended up with the Delta variant. And if we keep doing that, like if this virus continues to spread, even if it's among healthy people who aren't dying, right, it could mutate again and it could get more serious. And we could undo all the work we've ever done. So I guess my point is, like, to your last point, Christy, where you said, like, if I were 70, I'd get the vaccine. I would say, and I say this, like, definitely, sincerely, kindly, like, I would say this isn't just about you, right? This is about everybody else. You may be safe. You may not die, but somebody else might. Somebody else has. Somebody else will. It seems to me that every death from COVID is preventable right now by us all taking on whatever risk we believe it to be and get the vaccine. I believe my risk in getting the vaccine is very low, so it's very easy for me to make that decision. But even if it were high, I would still get it because I don't want my kids getting COVID. Matt right now is working in, the pediatric emergency room, and he's doing nights and he's doing wards. And they're seeing more and more and more kids in the hospital with COVID pneumonia. I told you in the last text message, they're out of beds. And that's not just from COVID, sure. But if you're out of beds because A, kids have COVID pneumonia and that's serious, or B, they're in there because they need to be treated, maybe they're not going to die, but then some other kid comes in with like some sort of, ketoacidosis or whatever it is, and there's no room for him in the hospital, that's terrible. That is not a situation that we want to be in or that doctors want to be in. They have an 18-year-old in the hospital right now that they had to give remdesivir to. That is the last line drug that they give somebody. And not everybody survives that. And it's from COVID. But this is all preventable now with the vaccine. And the only way it's going to work is if we reach a level of herd immunity, which means enough people are vaccinated so that the disease has nowhere to go and to spread. So that's why I really am begging people to consider how the vaccine works, what the science tells us, consider what we know, and then make our decisions accordingly based on not only our own risk and not only the risks of our families and our children, but of those around us and our community. So that's my piece. I'm sure if you have any questions, I can hopefully maybe answer them. I hope this was helpful. I hope you don't see this, and I say this to Christy, to Jenny, to anybody in the family, as judgmental or as lecturing, because to me, this involves all of us. So that's why it's not a lecture, it's a conversation. It's one that I want to have with as many people as possible because I think that's important. Okay, love you guys. Bye.